On Thoughts and Aphorisms by the Mother. It is no use reading books of guidance if one is not determined to live what they teach. Blessings, the Mother. Aphorism 1. There are two allied powers in man, knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is so much of truth, seen in a distorted medium as the mind arrives at by groping. Wisdom, what the eye of divine vision sees in the spirit. Someone has asked me, why are the powers allied? I suppose that we are so used to seeing all the elements in man quarreling among themselves that the idea of their being allied causes astonishment. But these quarrels are only apparent. All the powers which come from the higher regions are in fact necessarily allied. They are united. They have agreed to fight the ignorance. And Sri Aurobindo says clearly enough, for those who understand, that one of these powers belongs to the mind and that the other belongs to the spirit. And this is precisely the profound truth that Sri Aurobindo wants to reveal in this aphorism. If the mind tries to obtain the second power, it is unable to do so, since it is the power that belongs to the spirit and arises in the human being together with the spiritual consciousness. Knowledge is something that the mind can obtain through much effort, although this is not the true knowledge, but only a mental aspect of knowledge, whereas wisdom does not at all belong to the mind, which is altogether incapable of obtaining it, because in fact it doesn't even know what it is. I repeat, wisdom is essentially a power of the spirit, and it can arise only with the spiritual consciousness. It would have been interesting to ask what Sri Aurobindo means when he speaks of the truth seen in a distorted medium. First of all, what is this distorted medium, and what does the truth become in a distorted medium? As always, what Sri Aurobindo says can have several levels of meaning. One is more specific, the other more general. In the most specific sense, the distorted medium is the mental medium which works in ignorance, and which is therefore unable to express truth in its purity. But since life as a whole is lived in ignorance, the distorted medium is also the earth atmosphere which, in its entirety, distorts the truth seeking to express itself through it. And here lies the most subtle point of this aphorism. What can be the mind arrive at by groping? We know that it is always groping, seeking to know, erring, returning upon its previous attempts and trying again. Its progress is very, very halting. But what can it grasp of the truth? Is it a fragment, a piece, something which is still the truth but only partially, incompletely, or is it something which is no longer the truth? That is the interesting point. We are used to being told, perhaps we have also repeated many times, that one can only have partial, incomplete, fragmentary knowledge, which therefore cannot be true knowledge. This point of view is rather trite. One need only to have studied a little in life to be aware of it. However, what Sri Aurobindo means by the truth seen in a distorted medium is far more interesting than that. Truth itself takes on another aspect. In this medium it is no longer the truth, but a distortion of the truth. Consequently, what can be seized of it is not a fragment which would be true, but an aspect, the false appearance of a truth, which has itself melted away. I'm going to give you an image to try to make myself understood. It is nothing more than an image. Do not take it literally. If we compare the essential truth to a sphere of immaculate, dazzling white light, we can say that in the mental medium, in the mental atmosphere, this integral white light is transformed into thousands and thousands of shades, each of which has its own distinct color because they're all separated from one another. The medium distorts the white light and makes it appear as innumerable different colors, red, green, yellow, blue, etc., which are sometimes very discordant. And the mind seizes not a little fragment of the white light, of the white sphere, but a larger, smaller number of the little lights of various colors with which it cannot even reconstitute the white light. Therefore, it cannot reach the truth. It does not possess fragments of truth, but a truth that is broken up. It is a state of decomposition. The truth is a whole and everything is necessary. The distorted medium through which you see the mental atmosphere is unsuited for the manifestation or the expression or even the perception of all the elements. And one can say that the better part is lost. So it can no longer be called truth, but rather something in which essence is true, and yet no longer so at all in the mental atmosphere. It is an ignorance. So to summarize, I shall say that knowledge, as it can be grasped by the human mind, is necessarily knowledge in ignorance. One could almost say an ignorant knowledge. Wisdom is the vision of truth in its essence and of its application in the manifestation. Aphorism 2. Inspiration is a slender river of brightness leaping from a vast and eternal knowledge. It exceeds reason more perfectly than reason exceeds the knowledge of the senses. A certain number of questions you have asked are alike. Why did Sri Aurobindo say it like this, one thing or another? I could reply, he said it like this because he saw it like this. But to begin with, one thing should be understood. These are definitions given by Sri Aurobindo, definitions which he gives mostly in a paradoxical form to compel us to think. There are dictionary definitions which are the ordinary explanations of the words as they are commonly understood. These do not make you think. What Sri Aurobindo says, however, is said in order to break up the usual conception, to bring you in touch with a deeper truth. In this way, a whole lot of questions are eliminated. The effort one must make is to try to find the deeper knowledge, the deeper truth that Sri Aurobindo has expressed in this way, which is not the usual way of defining a word. I shall select some questions. The first one, which interests me because it comes from a thoughtful person, concerns the word knowledge and compares the way Sri Aurobindo has used the word in this aphorism with the way he uses it in the aphorism we read last week. When in the last week's aphorism Sri Aurobindo opposed, as one might say, knowledge to wisdom, he was speaking of knowledge as it is lived in the average human consciousness, the knowledge which is obtained through effort and mental development, whereas here, on the contrary, the knowledge he speaks of is the essential knowledge, the supramental divine knowledge, knowledge by identity. And this is why he describes it here as vast and eternal, which clearly indicates that it is not human knowledge as we normally understand it. Many people have asked why Sri Aurobindo says that the river is slender. This is an expressive image which creates a striking contrast between the immensity of the divine supramental knowledge, the origin of this inspiration which is infinite, and what a human mind can perceive of it and receive from it. Even when you are in contact with these domains, the portion, so to say, which you perceive is minimal, slender. It is like a tiny little stream or a few falling drops, and these drops are so pure, so brilliant, so complete in themselves that they give you the sense of a marvelous inspiration, the impression that you have reached infinite domains and risen very high above the ordinary human condition. And yet this is nothing in comparison with what is still to be perceived. I have also been asked if the psychic being or the psychic consciousness is the medium through which the inspiration is perceived. Generally, yes. The first contact you have with higher regions is a psychic one. Certainly, before an inner psychic opening is achieved, it is difficult to have these inspirations. It can happen as an exception, and under exceptional conditions as a grace. But the true contact comes through the psychic, because the psychic consciousness is certainly the medium with the greatest affinity with the divine truth. Later, when one has emerged from the mental consciousness into a higher consciousness beyond the mind, beyond even the higher mind, and when one opens oneself to the overmind regions, and through the overmind to the supermind, one can receive inspirations directly. And naturally, at that point, they become more frequent, richer, if one may say so, more complete. There comes a time when inspiration can be obtained at all, at will. But this obviously demands considerable inner development. And as we have just said, the inspiration from regions far above the mind surpasses in value and quality the highest achievements of the mind, such as reason. Reason is certainly at the apex of human mental activity. It can review and control the knowledge acquired with the help of the senses. It has often been said that the senses are altogether defective instruments of knowledge, and that they are capable of perceiving things as they are, that the information they supply is superficial and very often faulty. When it is fully developed, the human reason knows this and knows not truth, the knowledge of the senses, and does not trust the knowledge of the senses. It is only if one is infra-rational, if I may say so, that one believes that all one sees, hears and touches is absolutely true. As soon as one is developed in the region of higher reason, one knows that all these notions are almost essentially false, and that one can in no way rely on them. But the knowledge one receives from the supramental and divine region surpasses all that can be conceived or understood by reason, at least to the same extent that reason surpasses the knowledge of the senses. Several questions concern a practical point: how to develop the capacity for inspiration, what are the conditions needed to receive inspiration, and is it possible to have it constantly? I have already applied to this. When one opens oneself to the supramental regions, one puts oneself in the right state for receiving constant inspirations. Until then, the best method is to silence the mind as much as possible, to turn it upwards, and to remain in a state of silent and attentive receptivity. The more one is able to establish a silent, perfect calm in the mind, the more one becomes capable of receiving inspirations. It was also asked whether inspirations are of different qualities. In origin, no. They always come down from the regions of pure knowledge and penetrate whatever part of the human being is most receptive, best adaptive to them, to receive them. But these inspirations may apply to different domains of action. They can be inspirations of pure knowledge. They can also be inspirations that contribute to one's effort to progress. And they can also be inspirations for action, which help in the practical and outer realization. But the question here is the use one makes of the inspiration rather than of the quality of the inspiration. The inspiration is always like a drop of light and truth which succeeds in penetrating the human consciousness. What the human consciousness does with this drop depends on the attitude, the need, the occasion, the circumstances. That does not alter the essential nature of the inspiration, but it does alter the use one makes of it, its practical application. Some of the other questions concern the difference between inspiration and intuition. They are not the same thing, but I think that we will have the opportunity of returning to this subject in the course of our reading. When Sri Aurobindo tells us that he considers intuition to be what he considers intuition to be, we shall come back to it. In a general and almost absolute way, if you wish to profit from these readings as from all of Sri Aurobindo's writings, the best method is this. Having gathered your consciousness and focused your attention on what you are reading, you must establish a minimum of mental tranquility. The best thing would be to obtain perfect silence and achieve a state of immobility of the mind, immobility of the brain, I might say, so that the attention becomes as still and immobile as a mirror, like the surface of an absolutely still water. Then what one has read passes through the surface and penetrates deep into the being where it is received with minimum of distortion. Afterwards, sometimes long afterwards, it wells up again from the depths and manifests in the brain with its full power of comprehension, not as knowledge acquired from outside, but as a light one carried within. In this way, the faculty of understanding is at its highest, whereas if, while you read, the mind remains agitated and tries to understand at once what it is reading, you lose more than 3/4 of the force, the knowledge of the truth contained in the words. And if you are able to refrain from asking questions until this process of absorption and inner awakening is completed, well, then you find that you have far fewer questions to ask, because you will have a better understanding of what you have read.